Hello everyone, it's Carrie, and today I'm happy to be a part of the 2019 Doll Artist Halloween YouTube collab. Participating in this epic collab are His Name is Aiken, Characters Factory, Doll's Brand New Look, Hextian, Ten Dance Oak, Enchantarium, Kira's Workshop, Delightful, myself Skeriosities, The Doll Fairy, H. Ollie Crafts, Moonlight Jewel, Sky the Golden, Tiamat Creations, Blank Space Dolls, The Dolly Geek, Poppin' Atler, and my Minimun. It was so much fun connecting with fellow doll artists again, and also collaborating with some for the very first time. For the Halloween theme, we were to create a doll inspired by the season. One of my favorite parts about this project was seeing what everyone else did. Everyone's ideas were so unique, and as usual, I'm totally blown away with the talent and creativity of this group. For my character, I did an 18th century French female version of Edward Scissorhands. In this video, I'll be sharing the costume making, how I made the scissor hands, the face up, and the hairstyling. Make sure to stay tuned to the end of the video to see the final photos, as well as the full group photo to check out all the awesome dolls everyone completed for this collab. So a little bit about what led me to the decision to make this character. This is a very old book that was handed down to me when I was super little. I loved it so much, and it inspires a lot of my dolls. I used to look through page by page and spend so much time just staring at the pages. This is a Draculara with pink hair, probably the second or third doll I ever made around the end of 2011 or early 2012. It was in a similar style. If you follow my work, you may have noticed that many of my recent dolls and several of my older dolls have been in a similar style. It's just something that speaks to me, and I like to be able to do them when I'm not doing commissions. So I decided to do this one as a female Edward Scissorhands. Edward Scissorhands is an epically classic Tim Burton movie from 1990s, I think 1990 actually, starring Johnny Depp and Winona Ryder. And since I've already created these past two characters, I decided to do a female version with my 18th century French haute couture twist. If you're new to my channel, I'm a full-time artist based in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've been customizing dolls since around the 2011-2012 timeframe, and I also teach in-person face-up classes. So follow me on Facebook or Instagram to keep up with my teaching schedule if you're interested in that, or subscribe to my Patreon for step-by-step close-up learning modules. So after removing the factory hair by scraping out the glue with a screwdriver and pulling it out the neck with a hemostat, now I'm removing the factory paint from the scalp and the face with some pure acetone. I could have actually just left that scalp paint because it was black and I'm rooting with black hair, but oh well, I guess I missed that. So I like to paint the scalp just in case. It just makes the hair look a little bit fuller and not the scalp not so noticeable if the hair is thin in some areas. But when rooting with this alpaca yarn, it really does well to cover the scalp because it's such a thick fiber. So I'm just tying that up after rooting it and then giving her a turban to protect the hair when I do the face up. So my video is just going to be in the order of the work that I did, so I go back and forth between projects as things dry. The first thing that I'm doing is working on the scissors, and I decided to cut them out of some really heavy, concentrated, thick cardboard. And it's not super thick, it's more like strong cardboard. And because I wanted the scissors to look nice and clean cut, I decided rather than use clay to start with a base of cardboard and then use some resin here in a moment to show you how I did that. So I'm just drawing them out and cutting them out with some little scissors to get all those fine details. And for the handles, I'm using an X-Acto knife to cut them out, and in some of them where it's just a circle, I'm using a hole punch. And using this cardboard is really just allowing me to give the shape that I want to the scissors, which is more difficult if I had started with clay. In my previous Edward Scissorhands, I actually used some wire base and clay, and they turned out okay, but I wanted these to be a little bit thinner. So I'm mixing the equal parts of this resin, and then I'm coating one side and trying to get the edges as well. And then I let that dry, and then I give it another coat, and then I let that dry, and then I gave it some coats on the side and on the other side as well. And once I'm done, once they dry, I let them dry each coat overnight. So this took several days just to drying time. So this is what they look like after the first coat. So this just, the resin is just adding stability to that cardboard. I could have used Worbla, but when I use Worbla, the texture of the Worbla shows, and then if you see some of my previous collab videos where I showed how I use Worbla, I have to use a glue coat to make it smooth, and that would make too much thickness for what I would have liked for this project. So I'm using some of this super stretchy, sort of shimmery vinyl for the leggings. I'm just giving some thigh-high sort of tights to start with on the costume. And how I made this costume, I really just worked pretty organically, just decided what I was doing as I went. I did do a basic sketch of an idea, but really it changed a lot from what I decided to do. So flipping those tights inside out and trying them on her legs. And once I have them on her legs, then I decided to add some bits and pieces of some leather looking stretchy vinyl to give it that Edward Scissorhands pieced together look. So I just cut it to size and then I stitched it on the tight. What's good about the Edward Scissorhands costume, which I'm not trying to duplicate at all, I'm really just trying to give it sort of that same kind of feel as, or look as, the Edward Scissorhands costume without copying it exactly. But what's good about the costume is that a lot of the stitches show already, so it makes it easy to stitch without worrying about hiding seams and things. It was a lot of fun to create this costume, though I must say the costume took me probably 50-60 hours to complete. So I obviously will not be showing the full process in this video. So here I'm just stitching up my classic short. If you've seen some of my previous videos, I make shorts out of vinyl for a lot of my dolls. I'm using this nice stretchy vinyl for this one so I could make it very skin tight. And I made it sort of a boy short that's a little bit high-waisted. Now I'm using some of these jump rings to add some details to the tights, making them into little buckles and things. So onto the corset, I'm using some of this super stretchy black vinyl for the corset. Sometimes I use a pattern. I have a few patterns, and if you're a follower or a subscriber over on Patreon, you'll see that I have a corset in the patterns that I have in the library of rewards. This is similar to the one that I have there, but it is, I'm just playing it by ear and fitting it to the doll, which I'm kind of using as a mannequin there. Just tattering up the edges of the corset to look similar. I'm using some reference photos of Edward Scissorhands just to get some ideas. And then I cut 2 slits up the front to start to make this more fitted. And then I cut them into V's. And then I'll stitch them up again to make it more of a fitted look. So back to the scissors, I'm using this nail file. It's an electric nail file, and it kind of does the same as what a Dremel would do, but just at a lower capacity. So it's not going to damage the Dremel would be too harsh to use on such small pieces. So the nail file just makes a quicker filing process. So I filed down that epoxy resin, and now I'm painting each piece with some craft paint, some like gunmetal or dark gray craft paint. Now I need a base on the hands for the scissors to go into, and I'm using this epoxy sculpt, equal parts of each type, what would you call it? So there's 2 different kinds of clay that you mix together, and you just have equal parts of each of them. And once you blend that together, then it becomes the clay, and then I'm shaping that into some pieces that will go on top of the hand. And this is just a base, and then I'll add some more detail in a little bit. So I'm just making a simple shape, and then also adding a little bit of this rectangle piece up near the wrist, but being careful that the wrist will still be able to be moved once everything dries. And again, once I add the scissors, then I'll add some more detail to the look. So I had to cut some of the scissors off to put the one of the handle on each side to fit them in, but it's really neat because they can still move. So here's where I've gotten with the costume so far. With that corset, I added some eyelets and a bunch of different little details, belts around the waist, and then I added some shoulders with some vinyl, some puffy shoulders, and now I'm just making the arms to attach to the shoulders. And sort of the same concept as when I made the tights. And then this is the basic shape I used to make the skirt. So one for each side, and then I duplicated those a little bit larger in a different kind of vinyl, in the smooth vinyl, just to give a layered look. And like I said, the costume took over a week of working like 10 to 12 hour days to complete. So I won't be showing the full process. Here we are with the detail on the Scissorhands so far. I just added some details to the top and then some little balls to the side and smushed them down with a crafting tool. So now I'm just adding more paint to those details. I'm just giving it all a base in that dark gray. And then I'm going back on the scissors and adding some more silver, or adding some silver to some of the detail on the scissor blades. So with a nice base of either black or dark gray, the silver shows up very nicely. I have found that if I had a base of white or that light gray, that the silver wouldn't show up as well. So just a tip there, if you're trying to paint something silver, a nice base of black or gray to start with really helps. So here I'm painting some more detail, the part on the wrist in brown, and then as you can see, I was able to make it so the scissors are movable. So that was a lot of fun. Then I coated everything with a couple of coats of this Liquitex matte varnish for protection from chipping. And here we are with the full costume. And again, like I said, it took me so long to make this costume that I wasn't able to show the whole process. But the sleeves and the shoulders, that's actually a jacket that I made to go over the corset. And then I added some stitching to the back of the short for some back detail. And just added a bunch of stitches and tried to add a lot of detail without going too far. And then gave her a little necklace as well. I added some little wristbands to cover the area when I put the hands on her. I can pull those down to look like a sort of a belt around the wrist. I also painted up some shoes and added some of the vinyl to the shoe to kind of pull it all together. So I was pretty thrilled with the costume. So onto the face up. The face up is my favorite part, and this is the part that I like to teach and coach on in my Patreon page. So to start, I gave her about 4 or 5 coats of Mr. Super Clear to give it a nice tooth. And then I start adding white for the eyes to give it a nice shape. I shape it with the white for the eyes first. It just makes it for easier erasing and just gives me sort of a template to start adding the lines to. So once I feel comfortable with the shape of the white, then I'll add a very light line for the upper eyelid and then start layering in the tear duct and waterline. Once I've shaped the eye and added the base colors for that, then I'll start adding some shading around the eyelid using some pan pastels. The supplies that I use are in the description box below. I have an Amazon shop where I have listed all of my products and some comments on how I use them, so that's super helpful. If you want to check that out, that's in the link below. So I use pan pastels, but I also pan pastels, when I first started using them and buying my kit, they didn't have the colors that I needed. The range, since it's sort of a newer product, the range of colors isn't as expansive as maybe some of the soft pastel brands, but I'm able to mix the colors by shaving it off into another container and mixing them sort of like what is that called, a pistol, or anyway, just mixing them. So I'm giving the Straculara has a pink skin tone, so I'm using some peach colors to give it more of a lighter skin tone and tone down some of that pink. Using the darker shades in areas like around the nose and eyelids, and then using the lighter tones to give her some shading in the forehead, nose, and cheeks. Then making sure to carry that color all around the head so there isn't a sharp makeup line. If you're a supporter over on Patreon, I just posted a library of all of the rewards that I've posted since May since my relaunch in May, and so a lot of those old video clips and close-up game changers, they're all available in one spot for you, and I'll try to keep that updated. And if you're a new patron, then you'll have access to all of those old close-up step-by-step tutorials as well, including how to draw the waterline and tear duct and shading and things like that. So this is sort of the first layer. At this point, I would likely give her another few coats of Mr. Super Clear to give it back some tooth and to protect the work that I've done if I need to do any erasing. And I'm going in with a white to add some highlights to certain areas like the eyelids and upper lip. So to do the eyebrows on this one, I'm using some black pan pastel with a tiny flat brush and just kind of giving them some shape. And then because I have sealed it, I can erase. I always try to seal right before I do the eyebrows because I know I'm going to use my tiny eraser to shape them. This is a Tombow, I think it's called Mono Erase. It's a very tiny eraser. And then I'm toning that down a little bit, blending it out with a Q-tip before I go back in with the watercolor pencil to add the line detail. So I decided to give her blue eyes. I believe Johnny Depp has blue eyes, and so I thought I would just do that for her. And I mainly use Derwent watercolor pencils, but I've recently started using Arteza, and they work almost just as well. Some of them even better. So I've been enjoying all the colors in the large watercolor set from Arteza. That is in the link below as well, along with affiliate links. So thank you for all your nice comments, and for those of you who have mentioned that you would love to see more of these different close-up angles, I'll be happy to try to do those. That was before I made this video, so I'm not sure how many are in this one, but I'll be happy to do that going forward. I like to see different angles when I watch videos as well, so thank you so much for that feedback. So there I was adding a little bit of shading to the upper eyelid just to give it more of a shadow. And I'm going back in with this white watercolor pencil. This is all I have left of my Museum Aquarelle by Caran d'Ache of my white is in my, so I'm using that Derwent pencil extender. But it's a really good white pencil, so I was using that to start to draw the scars. And now I'm going to use this white craft paint to do some highlight detail in the eyes. So after giving her a few coats of Mr. Super Clear to seal it, probably 6 or 7 coats of Mr. Super Clear for sealing, I'll add some high gloss varnish to the eyes and then some eyelashes. I have an how to attach eyelashes video in my tutorials playlist. So onto the hair, I have rooted her with some black alpaca yarn, and I've combed through it, and now I'm just pulling out some hairs to style it. So I'm just pulling out these little pieces for the front because I wanted to keep the hair a little bit messy, and I'm really just playing with it a little bit to decide the shape as I go. I'm teasing it up a little bit because I know I want it to have that 18th century updo. I'm not quite sure if I want it to hang into a ponytail in the back or if I want to tuck it all up. At this point, I'm just kind of playing with it to decide. But again, I know that I want some of those pieces to hang in the front, so I pulled those out first. I do add a little bit of hair gel to my dolls to hold the style. I've recently been asked a little bit about that. That hair gel is something that professional doll hairstylists do use for the dolls that are in the store to hold their shape. I use a little bit less than some of those do. I use an unscented kind and very little of it. It doesn't get sticky at all. It just will help hold curl longer. And so I usually put a little bit of that on most of the dolls that I do at some point. So this one I think I ran a little bit through the ends, but I was very cautious not to use too much, because I wanted it to have this kind of flyaway hairstyle. I didn't want it to be too smooth, and that's what the gel would help with. So as you can see, I'm just kind of changing my mind to some of these. This little clip to hold the little pieces in the front that I decided on and out of my way. And I'm trying to give it sort of a French roll in the back. Wrapping it around the rat tail of this comb. It's like a foiling comb. And then I'm using a rubber band. Once I had those rolls, I attached them together with a rubber band, and then teased that up and tucked it back into the roll to give it more shape. And this is, I used to not show how I hairstyle because it can get kind of complicated and it's trial and error and it's difficult to film when I'm making all these different decisions. But I've been asked a lot to show how I do the hair, so here it is. It's just a lot of changing my mind. So I'm doing sort of a side ponytail that I gave it a little bit of a braid at the top, and then I'm tying it off with a rubber band and then kind of hiding that rubber band by looping the hair around and tucking it back in. And then I'll give it a little touch of the styling gel like I talked about to smooth out some of those pieces at the top and make sure that they hold the style and don't get too fly away. And then I've added a little bit of the gel, and when I say a little bit, it's a very tiny amount, to these little pieces so that I can curl them and they'll hold the curl. For the curling, I'm just using my flat iron to heat up this metal chopstick, and I believe I learned that from Hextian. So I've been doing that for a while, and I think I first saw him do that. So thank you, Hextian. And so after curling all of those little pieces, I wanted the ends to look a little bit ratty, so I'm leaving those flat. And then I think I went back with my flat iron to flatten them out a little bit. I didn't want them to look too perfect because it is like an Edward Scissorhands look. Then I curled the pieces in the ponytail, and I'm just kind of cutting off some of the edges. So now I'm putting her all together. So I want to say thank you to all my fellow collaborators for being so awesome to work with, and extra special thanks to all of my patrons for making my videos possible. I really appreciate you guys watching this. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, please make sure to stay tuned for the very end, where you'll see the full group photo for all of the collaborators. Make sure to check in the link below to check out the playlist to watch all of their videos, because they are all awesome creators, and also subscribe to their channels. Also stay tuned for the full look of this particular doll that I'm putting together, the final look photos, and follow me on Instagram and Facebook to see more photos of her and the other dolls I make. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you liked this video. If you did, I'd love it if you gave it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. I hope you guys have an awesome Halloween and wonderful day. Thank you again for watching. Have a great day. Bye.